Welcome on in, everybody, to the voice of college football. I am your host, Patrick Previty. This is the voice of college football on Notre Dame, and we're going to be talking a little bit about the Notre Dame football team today. Guys, welcome into the live. Sorry if there was a little bit of an echo just now, but I'm your host, Patrick Previty. This is the voice of college football on Notre Dame. And I missed you guys last week. I wasn't able to get on live. Crazy week, but hey, if there's any time to miss a live, it is definitely in the off season. So we're back. Last time we talked a little bit about the USC rivalry ending. And today we're going to be setting expectations. What exactly are we going to hope for in this upcoming season? Is it playoff or bust? Is it something that we can say that there's a successful season on the horizon, even if they don't get a win in the college football playoff? What does this culture look like? What are we looking at for the quarterback situation in the spring? And we're going to be taking a look at some pieces in this roster, some graduated, others moving into spring camp. I have a player I wanted to look out for and highlight today. That'll be Jaden Greathouse. And we're just going to be talking about how he can potentially impact this team, as well as going over some of the combine invites. The NFL Combine welcomed in 8 Notre Dame football players. We're going to take a look at how they ended up performing. Not all participated in every drill, but some still, well, everybody still participated in the measurables. So that is something to also look out for. But as I mentioned, going to be talking about setting expectations. Welcome in Michael Fan since 1967. Gotta love it, man. You've seen a lot of great moments for Notre Dame football. Personally, me, unfortunately, has not seen a national championship, but the Brian Kelly era was a vast improvement. And then obviously the Marcus Freeman era is now off to, in my opinion, a flying start. But as I mentioned, we're going to be going through those different topics, starting with setting expectations. What can we expect from this Notre Dame football team in 2025? Is it playoff or bust? Is it one win or bust? Is there an expectation to get back to the national championship? When we look at this schedule, it's more front-loaded, so we're going to have to rely on a quarterback, whether that's C.J. Carr, Steve Angeli, and Kenny Minchey, to hit the ground running. We're going to have to make sure that we lean on the run game. We have a great returning running back room, and we're going to have to see what we got in the wide receivers. Those guys transferring in, and some of the returners are also going to be very important for this team. As we all know, the offensive line and the defensive line, in my opinion, and I think everybody would have to agree, is at least deep. Now, maybe you don't have that top-end player on the defensive line just yet, but that player probably will rise to the occasion by the time fall comes around, and definitely by the time we end up going to play Miami. But the offensive line, defensive line should usually be taken care of as far as Notre Dame football is concerned, as we all know. And we got plenty of young guys in the defensive back room and the secondary that should also be able to lead us. So, talking expectations, we have to look at the schedule. We have to assess if this schedule is tougher than last season. In my opinion, I do think that the schedule that Notre Dame is working with is a little bit more difficult than last season, at least to start. As we all know, we opened last year up against Texas A&M. This year, again, in week 2, going to be playing Texas A&M. That is going to be huge. But right before that is at Miami. Miami is a completely different football team this season. They have Carson Beck at the helm, not Cam Ward. He's off to the NFL. How will they look come fall? I think they're still going to be very, very good. They're losing pretty much all of their receivers. So I think that that's very good for Notre Dame because they don't have to feel too overwhelmed by playing a Miami team that's should be firing on all cylinders, but they're going to be ready for that game. It's going to be a bit of a rivalry game, a non-conference game, obviously, for Miami, and that's going to be something to look out for. Can this Notre Dame team come in and take care of business in that first week? Should be something to look for. I think it'll be extremely important as an indicator for how this season's going to go. But as we all know, even in last season, when we lost to Northern Illinois, it wasn't the end of the world to suffer a loss in the first couple of weeks. If you can get out of Texas A&M and Miami 1-1, I still think that the rest of the schedule is very doable. I don't know exactly if a 2-loss Notre Dame team can get in with this schedule, but I definitely think, obviously, a one-loss team definitely can. So if you're 1-1 at the end of the first 2 weeks, that's a dub in my opinion, because then after that you got Purdue and then you're at Arkansas. Arkansas could be good. They could not be good. We'll just have to wait and see what they end up doing, especially in the fall camp. But I would still say that they're not on the level of Notre Dame. So starting maybe 3-1, that would be a big boost, especially whenever you go play a team that you haven't played before in Boise State. That is going to be another tough test. But as I mentioned earlier, with some of the returners and the players leaving for a team like Miami, it's the same situation for Boise State. They're ranked number 24th in the kind of like way too early rankings right now, but they could still be a major challenge, even if they don't hit that mark at being the 24th team in the country or whatever they might be by week 5. Now, I do still think that Notre Dame should be able to take care of business. So let's take a look at the rest of the schedule. We got NC State after that, USC, at Boston College, Navy, at Pitt, and then Syracuse and Stanford to end the season. Now, not a murderer's row as far as the rest of that schedule looks. Again, USC is a bit of a wild card. I definitely could see them potentially taking advantage of some of the things that Notre Dame does well. And I think Lincoln Riley has a sense of urgency with this squad and with his program that could potentially knock off Notre Dame if they are looking too far ahead. If by that point they have won every single game or they only have one loss, that USC game, even though it is at home, could potentially shock Notre Dame in a sense. Just keeping our eyes peeled for that. But let's now that we've looked at the schedule, let's take a look at what exactly we want from this team come the playoffs. Last season, they beat Indiana, and it wasn't really close. But Indiana should be much improved this year. They're obviously looking to make a jump. What is their expectations, right? Their expectations could be something along the lines of a team that wants to get a win in the college football playoff. When we look at Notre Dame, is last year repeatable? Can we replicate the success that we had in the playoffs? I think that this Notre Dame team can. I think that they certainly have lost some of the players, but we're in a different spot than a team like Indiana. When we set expectations, it's got to be something along the lines of, in my opinion, getting to the second round, past the first round, no matter who it is. We were able to take care of Indiana and then obviously take care of business against Penn State, against Georgia. And that is where we found ourselves in the championship. Is that something that Notre Dame can do this year? I don't know if they can make a full-fledged run, but this team could look completely different, especially by early spring. Obviously, this schedule and everything along the lines of this culture is pointing to another playoff appearance at the very least. So I think that is at the baseline, the expectation. And with some of what the other teams are and the other programs are trying to chase, I think that Notre Dame could potentially match. We aren't most likely going to get a draw in the first round against a team like Indiana again, who hasn't been there, who was ultra conservative and in my opinion, good matchup in Notre Dame's favor. But I still think that the expectation would be that they can take control of that first round and be able to move on further. I think it's huge for recruiting. Recruiting has been sky high, especially in recent years under Marcus Freeman. So they certainly have the bodies and they have the transfer portal bodies to make another run, no matter how you slice it. I would say final verdict, this team should have a win in the playoffs under their belt by the end of the season. I think that that's the expectation. That is a reasonable expectation. And when we compare ourselves separately from Indiana and to programs such as Ohio State, maybe even Georgia, Alabama, real blue bloods that are still very relevant in college football, you have to think that this Notre Dame team is expecting to get a playoff win. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below, if that is a fair assessment or what you're expecting from Notre Dame this season. I think that they can do that. All right. So, expectations aside, how did the NFL Combine go for some of the potential draftees or guys who are going to be late round picks, potentially sign with another team? Well, as I mentioned, the national championship Notre Dame football team welcomed in had eight players welcomed to the NFL Combine over this past week, and not all of them participated in every single drill, but they all participated in measurables. So let's start with Howard Cross, defensive lineman. He measured in at 6'1", so officially 6'1" 3/8, 285 pounds, 32 and a fourth inch arms, 10.5-inch hands, and he tested in his jumps. Nothing else, just the jumps. He had a 29-inch vertical and 8'8" broad jump. Now, if you're curious as to where that would have landed him among the defensive linemen, it was right around middle of the pack, but it was just a step behind the average. He was kind of in the area that was closer to the bottom than he was to the top as far as assessing the middle of the pack goes. And I still think that he's going to be a late round pick or a signee to a team, and he's going to have to cut his way into the NFL that way. But still, overall, he was able to check off some marks. He's got the above average length and above average hand size for his height. And I still think he did himself a service, even though the jumps weren't as impressive. But like I said, late round draft pick guy. Be very surprised if he fell out of the draft, but just saying those are potentially the expectations moving forward for him. Okay, defensive lineman Riley Mills was also invited to the NFL Combine. He measured in at 6'5", 3/8, 291 pounds, 32 and 5/8" arms, 9 and 7/8" hands. He did not participate in any testing or on-field work because of his knee. But I think he's pretty still well established to the point where he didn't need it as much, and he'll certainly get a chance to do something at his pro day if it aligns with that. Jack Kaiser, big Senior Bowl guy, had an amazing performance there, was great throughout that week. The linebacking room for the Senior Bowl chose him as their MVP on his team. Or, excuse me, he was chosen as the leader of the linebacker room and the MVP of that room by the other groups that were involved in the Senior Bowl. So the running back groups, I believe, and the offensive line groups chose the linebacker. That was the MVP. He measured in at 6'1", 230 pounds, 30 and 3/8" arms, and 9-inch hands. He did not test in the positional drills, but he received Kaiser did not test, but he received positive reviews for his positional drills. So he did test in the positionals, and we'll see how he tests in Notre Dame's pro day. He's done well so far to solidify, I would say, a mid-round pick through this entire pre-draft process. A lot of writers are expecting him to land probably in the 4th to 5th round range. But like I said, he really did himself a major favor in the Senior Bowl to get him to this spot. So I think Jack Kaiser could potentially go in the 4th round. Cornerback Benjamin Morrison is the next guy up, 6'1" 4", 193 pounds, 30 and 3/8" arms, 9 and 1/4" hands. Good measurables. He obviously did not participate in testing or any on-field drills because of his hip. His arm length might hurt him a little bit, but for reference, Cam Hart was 33 inches at the combine last year, so he still might be able to overcome that. I'm sure he still will. We're going to have to see more as far as whether or not his hip is okay, and I'm sure NFL scouts certainly want to see him potentially participate in the pro day, but we'll see if that ends up coming to fruition. He'll have to get healthy, check off all the boxes as far as his injuries, and his size still won't get him too bad. Let's move to safety. Xavier Watts, obviously one of the bigger names for Notre Dame, nationally known. 5'11", 3/4", 204 pounds, 30.5" arms, and 8 and 5/8" hands. Did not participate in testing or on-field workouts. He measured just under 6 foot, so which he's listed at on Notre Dame, but not the end of the world for him. He just cut right under. Another guy that, like I said, did not participate in the testing or on-field work, so there's still more to be determined on him, but I certainly think he's going to be a draft pick that a team uses, and I think hopefully he can find his way into the NFL as a starter. Okay, tight end Mitchell Evans was probably the guy who had the most to gain from this combine, maybe outside of Riley Leonard, and he certainly played he certainly participated in those drills and did very well, played very well. Measurements coming in at 6'5", 3/8", 258 pounds. So on the bit of a heavier side, 31 7/8" arms, 9.5" hands. Testing results: 4.74 second 40-yard dash. His 10-yard split was 1.55 seconds. He had a 31-inch vertical, 9'7" broad jump, 7.25 three-cone drill, and a 4.4-second short shuttle. Now, he was the only Notre Dame participant to produce a complete relative athletic score because he was the only one to participate in every single one of the drills. His workouts were solid. A lot of the socials did kind of highlight his workouts during this combine, but it wasn't the most spectacular thing, but I certainly think he did himself a favor. Now, his relative athletic score, which is the RAS. It combines the size, speed, explosiveness, and agility to produce a score relative to other prospects in that player's position, was 7.8. Ranked 269 out of 1,216 tight ends since 1987. That still ends up being pretty good. Obviously, some of the younger guys are at the top of that list because it's something that has just been more skewed as time has gone on, but still something that he can go home about. He was productive in college when he was healthy and seems to be trending towards a mid-round draft slot. His positional drills, like I said, looked good. He might not have the top-end athleticism that teams are looking for in their start tight end, but 12 personnel heavy teams should be interested in him as a high-quality second tight end at the very least. And I think he did himself a major favor in this combine. And despite, anybody saying that his positional stuff wasn't as crisp or as good as it needed to be, I certainly think he'll get a chance to do it again at his pro day, and he'll probably end up improving on some of those aspects. Okay, the man of the hour, Riley Leonard, went to the combine. There was a lot of talk about Will Howard not playing well, Jalen Milroe skipping some of the other measurables that probably could have helped his draft stock. Well, Riley Leonard kind of went all hands on deck, and he participated in a fair amount of stuff. Now, he probably didn't need to show as much through some of the testing results, but he still ended up participating. 6'3", 3/4, 216 pounds. So he's got good size. Certainly not a question anyway. If we all saw that first drive against Ohio State, we all knew the size that he presented. He had 31 and 5/8 inch arms. And now for the hand size, drum roll, 9.5 inch hands. So he checks that box. No Riley small hands Leonard for the NFL scouts or for anybody running a meme account to use. He was able to check that off. Does it matter? No, not at all, but he doesn't have to deal with that. The question is whether he can throw at the NFL level, and I think he did his best to answer that on Saturday when the quarterbacks participated in the throwing drills. I think he did a good job. I don't think it was perfect, but the Will Howard performance and the Jalen Milroe performance certainly put Riley Leonard in a better light, right? Because there was no bad throws, there were no really big misses. So I think just as he can continue to do that well enough, he can potentially find himself off the board at some point in day 3. And I would say probably 5th or 6th round, depending on the organization. Now, in-person accounts, Leonard, he did perform well on the field. So that is really good. I did go to the Senior Bowl and he did play well at the Senior Bowl. He seems to only be continuously chipping away at that draft stock, and he's continuously improving, which is a really great sign. He's had one heck of a year and unfortunately built a little bit of a reputation for not being an NFL type of passer, but still doesn't matter because he's got a national championship appearance through this entire time with Notre Dame, and he's got a great Senior Bowl performance and now continues that in the combine. We'll see what he can do at the pro day, and we'll see if he'll run. Bo Collins is the last man on this list. 6'3", 201 pounds, 31 and 5/8 inch arms, 9.5 inch hands. He did not participate in any testing or on-field workouts, so all TBD as far as Bo Collins is concerned. Let me know what you guys think, where some of these Notre Dame players are going to go in the NFL draft. It should be a very interesting time. I think that Riley Leonard will potentially go in like the 5th round, depending on what team will fall in love with him, because there probably will be a team. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Now, as I mentioned, I did want to highlight some of the players that are returning, specifically Jaden Greathouse for the wide receivers, because I think it is extremely important. When we talk about the the quarterback situation, whether it's CJ Carr, Steve Angeli, or Kenny Minchey, they're going to have to rely on the returning receivers. Malachi Fields is not going to be here in the spring. He'll show up in the summer, but we're going to be looking for some of those guys to build some chemistry with the people that we already have in the building. Jaden had a good junior year. He ended on a high note. Obviously, some of his expectations were a little bit higher going into this season, and there were points during this year where it felt like he could be doing more. But as the season went on, and those late games needed somebody to produce, he was the one to do it. 13 catches, 233 yards, 3 touchdowns in those crucial late games. He established himself as the team's top receiver. He had only 592 yards total last year and 4 touchdowns, but with that clutch performance and that streak of games, he was able to really set himself as at least the top 2 or the best receiver in this room. And I think that he is going to be somebody that we're going to have to watch, especially in spring, to hopefully take that next step and be more of a consistent security blanket. We don't know exactly what we have in this tight end room. It's full of injuries and players who haven't been able to catch on just yet or make their way through the depth chart. Our wide receiving room is going to be the biggest part of that. Obviously, we're welcoming in Malachi Fields, like I said, but also Will Pauling. Will is going to have to try to replicate what he was able to do at his previous school. And, at Wisconsin, he had 42 receptions, 470 yards, and 3 touchdowns. We'll see if he can bring that over to Notre Dame. We've had some trouble being able to have some of those offensive weapons and utility guys show what they can do in the Notre Dame offense. Hopefully he can do that, and it'll help Jaden Greathouse as he hopefully takes another step for this wide receiving group. Jordan Faison recorded 30 catches for 356 yards and 1 touchdown last season, so he will also be in the room. Malachi Fields, mentioned his name a few times now. He had 55 receptions for 808 yards and 5 touchdowns in his previous season at Virginia. That will be a big point of emphasis to make sure that all 4 of those guys, if they are able, and they are still those 4 main guys that we're going to go with in the fall, to get involved early to help out a potentially young quarterback, or no matter what, a quarterback that doesn't have a lot of experience. Because as I've mentioned in previous lives and in previous videos, that quarterback room doesn't have a ton of snaps under their belt. Hopefully Steve Angeli, if he's the guy who's tapped in to be the starting quarterback, can adjust even quicker in that sense and help this team continue to set the expectations with wins against Miami and Texas A&M early on. I think that will be something really great to watch out for. As I mentioned, solidified his role as the primary target. Young talents will, like Micah Gilbert and some of the other guys that we have in the room, could potentially step up, have impactful roles. But I think it's Greathouse who's going to be that guy who could be the number 1 option for this wide receiving group and for this Notre Dame offense. The bottom line is this roster is just continuously evolving. We have a ton of key returning players. Notre Dame's receiving corps is, could see significant growth, or they could struggle due to that inexperience. But establishing trust is the biggest thing for this team. And I got faith that Greathouse can do it. I don't know which quarterback just yet. We'll see in the spring. Is going to be the one who's throwing him the ball and the one that is best equipped to get the ball into the receiver's hands. But it will be something that Marcus Freeman and the staff will decide. And I got full faith that they're going to decide on the right player to throw that ball and hand it off to Jeremiah Love, and those boys should have a very easy job doing it. But yeah, guys, let me know what you think in the comment section down below. How will Jaden Greathouse fare in his 2025 role as compared to 2024? I think he'll take that next step. I think all signs lead to it. I think there's going to be other wide receivers that certainly get in on the fun, but I think he's the guy that this team will be able to rely on in crucial games next year, and in some of the games where we're looking for somebody to have a spark on this offense. So that is the 3 topics that I wanted to cover today mainly, but I also wanted to talk a little bit about the USC rivalry. I think it's really interesting what's going on in Notre Dame football and in the entire sport nationally. Obviously, there's a lot of different things with the ACC suit and with the playoff, new expansion stuff, and just with general feelings around the Big Ten not wanting to schedule more games where they end up having their program travel a fair amount across the country. And I think that they're all very valid. I was looking at the comments in the previous video when I assessed Notre Dame's rivalry with USC, the non-committal nature of their AD and of Lincoln Riley. And I certainly get the perspective that a Big Ten team doesn't want to travel as much. But this is something that Notre Dame has been doing for years now, forever, since I've started watching Notre Dame football. And I don't really see a perspective that is all that fair when we talk about USC not wanting to travel, but Notre Dame still having to travel. I understand Notre Dame's not in a conference, but if USC doesn't want to take on the travel and they don't see it as something that's super beneficial, then I don't think blaming Notre Dame for any sort of dropout or loss of rivalry is fair. I think it's almost borderline hypocritical, because if Notre Dame wants to continue to travel and to go to Los Angeles, play Navy wherever they want to play Navy, they go to Miami, or they also go to Texas A&M, they go to Kyle Field, and they do all this in one season. I get it. It's their brand, and it might not be something that USC wants to do, especially not being in the Big Ten. But I think it's very tough for me to really buy in and say that that is a fair assessment for what USC is doing. I think that the playoff committee will benefit, or at least give the benefit of the doubt to some of the teams that do schedule like that. They certainly have to take in travel. They have to take in how long the season it is. And I think even with the expansion, we're going to see a lot of teams potentially be able to afford losses rather than stacking something like an Indiana schedule or anything else where you can kind of stack wins. I think that this committee is certainly open to losses. And if you suffer a loss because of travel and because the season just gets on top of you and because you have 9 Big Ten games and the Big Ten conference is potentially the best in all of college football, I don't really think that that will hurt you. I think it will only help you, and it will only potentially bring better football for college fans and myself, Notre Dame fans alike, and what we all want to see. I think it'll be very interesting to see how exactly this USC front office continues to assess what they want to do in the future. But I definitely think Notre Dame is not going to be the one to pull the trigger and say, hey, we don't want to do this rivalry anymore. Last topic here I'll touch on a little bit too is the spring game. The spring game is still scheduled for April. A lot of teams are falling out of the spring game schedule, and they're saying, we don't want to play in it. It's too risky. And at the end of the day, it is just one half or two halves of football that might not be as worth it as you might think. With the transfer portal, with NIL, it certainly changed the game. We know Notre Dame has embraced the NFL style of program building. Will they do that? There's no word on it just yet. Will they take it off of the schedule? Will they eliminate the spring game? Right now, it's still a go. And I think it is worth it in a sense still, because they don't have a quarterback and they have a borderline 3-man race. Greg McElroy did say last week that he didn't think that Kenny Minchey was truly in the running, but as we all know, he is definitely going to get a look, and he's going to have some first-team reps on any given practice. So we know that it is a 3-man race. Can you figure that out in spring practice without a game? Maybe you can figure out who's the top 2, but you might need that spring game. And Notre Dame right now has not canceled their spring game. They have not gone full NFL on everybody, and they're still going to have that game in April. So definitely also something to look out for. But guys, thank you so much for watching. This has been a live show setting expectations for Notre Dame football here on the Voice of College Football Network. And as always, I am your host, Patrick Previty, and I will see you guys next time and throughout this week with more Notre Dame football content.